Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Maqbool with you at PTV World, and of course with me are Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. In today's show we will be taking a look at a number of developments that have taken place in the country, and especially many that have taken place over the weekend. We know of course that there has been a lot of controversy and debate regarding what the President Dr. Alvi has tweeted about, claiming that he bears God as witness and that he did not in fact sign or endorse any of the two adopted laws regarding the Official Secrets Act and the Pakistan Army Act. And this is important, especially in terms of what he also continues to talk about regarding his officers and regarding his team, that he thinks have not accepted his orders or followed his instructions, and have gone away and acted in ways that he hadn't approved of. And this is important, especially in terms of what this indicates and how exactly the things have unfolded beyond that. We also know that the Law Minister and the Information Minister of the caretaker setup have also spoken about it, claiming that Article 75 points towards two options that the President has, and the third one is not available as to what seems to be the case that the President is pointing towards. He said he is not aware of the status of the two laws, and he spoke about how he was inquiring from his staff about the status of the two laws and he didn't get any information. And it also seems interesting that the way forward, as we saw in the aftermath of this particular statement, is that the order, then the notification that had come out, said that it has been deemed that the President had given his assent. And this is especially important given the fact that whether or not this is a possibility or can be done. There is of course also the issue with regards to the fact that the caretaker setup is pointing towards also that more than 10 days the President had taken over before responding to any of these laws, and so this is something that they had proceeded with, and there was no third option, as the President was pointing towards. So we're going to try and understand the legalities of this case and whether or not the President could do what he did, and if there was in fact something that took place in terms of his orders not being followed or implemented, what possibility existed in that part, and what now is the status of these particular laws given the President's statement, and what is going to be the legal course of action moving forward. We'll also, of course, take a look at what this means in terms of the different roles that various individuals had to play in this, particularly the Principal Secretary as well, and then, of course, whether or not anything which did not have any comments by the President could be returned, and then if it is returned, could actually be passed and adopted as a law. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that in our first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to take a look at the incident, of course, that had happened earlier in Jaranwallah and Faisalabad, and of course, we've seen a lot of violence that was followed by accusations of blasphemy that targeted the Christian minority in the area. We saw that the interim Prime Minister paid a visit to the victims, and then of course the people of the area whose houses were looted, how the mob of course also damaged a lot of these sacred places, including churches of the particular area, and ensured that the dignity of all minorities is important to Pakistan and that strict action will be taken against the culprits. There have also been announcements made regarding compensations to the families, but of course many things remain in terms of what this points towards, what sort of legal and political action is required to curb such incidents in the future, and what is going to be now the way forward, given the fact that we've seen plenty of such incidents before, and whether we're only going to be taking a look at the current investigation and law and order situation, or we will be able to reflect upon the laws that unfortunately have been abused. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that in our shows today. As I introduced before, I've been joined by Farrukh, Pitafi and Raja Faisal. We've also been joined online by Barrister Usama Ghumman, who's a legal expert, and of course Barrister Shabbir as well, also a legal expert. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Let me start with you, Usama. Given the fact that when we take a look at this current situation, there are a number of questions that of course have been raised, but let me start with what the President in fact tweeted about, which of course created a lot of controversy and debate, and he spoke about how he was not aware of where the two laws were. He kept inquiring about his staff, and it seemed that his particular will was not followed, and that his staff went beyond their jurisdiction as to what he was claiming. At the same time, we also heard the interim law minister and the information minister speaking about how this kind of option does not actually exist, and the president only had two, none of which were actually utilized. What do you think in terms of, especially after this particular press conference, is actually the legal course of action that is available to the president in such a circumstance? What is President Arif Alvi referring to, and what is the law minister referring to?
First of all, thank you, Sana. Sana, I think this present controversy, it goes back to a the very heart of what sort of federation we want. And there has been this constant sort of tug of war between presidency and parliamentary form of democracy, in which Prime Minister is the chief executive, and legislature and executive drawn from the legislature is supreme. So in fact, this controversy that the president has not assented to this bill, so this emanates from a constitutional requirement. For our viewers' benefit, I would very briefly like to reiterate, or a very brief and simplistic summary, that how this dish, what we call Act of Parliament, is made, how a law comes into being. So our constitution, in the definition of the parliament, the chapter concerning parliament, Ziaul Haq did, again, what I referred to. So he inserted president as the part of the parliament. So now president is part of the parliament after Ziaul Haq's amendments. So it has three basic institutions, if you would like to say. One is legislative chamber, has two sort of National Assembly and Senate, and then is the president. So a bill, any proposal, in order to become law, has to be passed by both of these houses of the parliament. They are called legislative chambers or houses, National Assembly or Senate, and then it does not become law until the president signs it. But it is not as simple. That's where the things get complicated. If the original constitutional, since it was supposed to be a parliamentary democracy, so original constitution said that if the president does not sign a bill within 10 days, then it shall be deemed to have been assented. That was the original article of the constitution, that is Article 75 of the constitution. But with the Ziaul Haq's amendments, and he wanted a strong presidency, a presidential form of government. So what he did, he changed this clause, and then he gave more power to the president in two ways. First, he increased the number of days that the president had to examine the bill. He increased from 10 to 30 days. And the other amendment he did, that he took away this power from the parliament and arrogated more power for himself, and that is that he removed this deeming clause. So assent was no longer deemed after Ziaul Haq's amendments. So previously, if a bill came to the president did not act for 10 days, it would become a law. But once Ziaul Haq came, he made this amendment, and then he removed, and now the president had 30 days to sit on the bill, and even afterward it would not become the law. That is how the constitution was amended. But in 2018th amendment, 18th amendment in 2010, when the parliamentarians were again revising the constitution and trying to restore this more balance towards parliamentary form of democracy and chief executive, prime ministerial form of democracy. So they first reduced the period from 30 days to 10 days, but then they also partially kept some sort of semblance of presidential control over bills. So they did not, they removed the deeming thing, but what they also did, they gave a presidential power in one sense, recognized the presidential power, that in the first round, if a bill comes before the president, they gave him 10 days to consider reconsider the bill and then return that bill with certain observations or his whatever the president has messaged. So point out the problems, and then they said that the parliament could reconsider that bill and it would come back to the president again, and that is where the deeming clause would kick in. They said if the parliament in the second round, the president does not sign the bill within 10 days, then it shall be deemed to have become law. This situation is very interesting. There was a bill before the president. The president did not return. In one version is he returned, but if he did not, it does not make much of a difference at this point in time. So the president did not give any suggestions on what were his problems. What we have seen until now, there's nothing to suggest that the president pointed out specific problems with the bill. So once the bills went back, or they were supposed to went back after 10 days, the government, since there was no National Assembly, reconsidered the bill. The parliament was not complete. So those bills, they became lapsed due to a constitutional requirement that if a bill passed by one National Assembly on the dissolution of or expiration of that period of National Assembly, those bills, if they have not become law, they become lapsed. So the next parliament has to consider it new. The president, knowing that if he sends these bills back after the dissolution of the National Assembly, it would the bills they would become they would lapse. So I think there's a slight problem there. The president should have in good faith within his constitutional term of 10 days. Send the bills back, and also with specific objections, what problems that he had with those bills. But the president did not do it. That is a constitutional lacuna. But I think propriety required president should have done it. But without presidential assent, the bills have not become law. That is what the legislative history, that is what the constitutional history says, that is how our jurisprudence, our constitutional history has evolved. That is what logic dictates, that though there were improprieties committed on the part of president also, he was supposed to spell out the reasons that he was remanding those bills back to the parliament, and he did not do it. But the bills have not become law. The deeming clause, deemed assent, kicks in in the second stage, and that is once the parliament had reconsidered and sent those bills back. So in that sense, this is where we are, and I think ultimately it is going to, the matter is going to end up in courts, which is very unfortunate, that these are political matters. They should not be taken to court. But we have seen a remarkable judicialization of our politics since last 15 to 18 years, especially after lawyers' restoration. And it's very unfortunate that there's a new incoming Chief Justice. There are going to be these big issues. And one of his first item or agenda is going to be this very, very contentious issues, because there was a significant party, a large public sphere. There was lots of discussion about these bills. So it would have been appropriate if these bills had been deliberated by the parliament, and now it's going to again land up in.
I think we can go towards Barrister Shabbir. Now, Barrister Shabbir, it's a very important, obviously, point which is being highlighted, and that is whether these bills, they are a law now or not. And the same question when was asked by a senior lawyer, Salman Akbar Raja Saab, he said it that as it is now part of the Gazette, of course it is part of the law as well, and that is why it is being practiced. Just wanted to know, what do you say about this on this fact? And one another thing which is being highlighted, of course, Barrister Usama highlighted here, that the reasons or recommendations from the presidential office, they were not obviously sent in time the 10-day span which we are talking about. And if, of course, he did say something to his staff, then he did not mention any of the reasons or any of the recommendations for giving assent or dissent or whatever. And can we say that this can be considered as a negligence on the part of presidential office, or can it be a sort of a hurdle in coming days when of course, if the case goes to the Supreme Court, whether this should be accepted as law or not?
Thank you. I think I'd like to thank Mr. Khawar for having explained for all of us the constitutional history and in particular his opinion on Article 75. By and large, I agree with the steps that he has explained, so we will not repeat it for you and for your listeners. But to come back to the specific question, I think the law minister in particular has taken a very clever stance, one which is legally very interesting. So what has he said? He has said that the president really has two options. One, either he should assent within 10 days, or within those 10 days, he should send a message. He should send his objections. So the law minister says that because he has not given any message or his objections, in his learned opinion, the bill is deemed to have been assented. Now, that is a very moot point, I would say. And picking up from Mr. Khawar's lead, in my opinion, the question remains whether the bill is deemed to have been assented or not. In my opinion, the bill is not deemed to have been assented because this deeming clause is provided in Article 75(2) of the Constitution. Now, 75(2) says it is only in the second round that a bill will be deemed to have been assented. When the Constitution specifically states something, then there is no room for the courts to put words in the Constitution. The Constitution, Article 75(2) says that it is only in the second reading that the bill will be deemed to have been assented, which means that without 75(2), there is no other occasion in which the bill would be deemed to have been assented. That is my straightforward opinion on Article 75(2). Now, a question arises, if the president, who in terms of Article 41 of the Constitution is head of the state and has denied signing the bill, and I think it is a matter of record that his signatures are not any. I don't think this is a case where someone has forged his signatures. So if his signatures are not there, and in terms of Article 75(2), the bill is not deemed to have been assented, in my view, it is not an act of Parliament. And it will always be a question open for a court if any action is taken on the basis of a bill which is not yet converted into an act of the Parliament in terms of Article 75. Then the courts can best explain whether or not it is even an act, and assuming if it is considered as an act, its rights can still be challenged on the ground that it is in violation of Article 75 or 1.
Right, and I'll come back with more legal questions, but Farrukh, I also want to know that, especially given our audiences and the kind of media buzz that sprung about over the weekend, we saw, of course, that after this particular tweet by the president, a lot of people were only just discussing this, and eventually, unfortunately, very quickly, we see sides forming, and in the country also people have strong opinions on either side. And I want to know that when the situation is so nuanced, how is it that when we move forward with what the president has claimed and what the parliament is claiming, is that we will be able to then deconstruct them and try to understand what really is going on. I understand there's a legal course of that, but in terms of what perception exists or how the media is talking about it, especially given the fact that the president tweeted about it, and add to that as well whether that was the perfect avenue to use given the situation.
Thank you very much, Sana. And because we have such legal luminaries in the program, I'm not going to actually comment on the legal part of the discussion. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus, as you have pointed out, also on the president's conduct and his opinion as well. Now the biggest question at this moment is whether the president, who has actually tweeted it from his personal account, believes that this law has become a law or not, right? And I just wanted to read the last part of his tweet, and that is important. However, I found out today that my staff undermined my will and command. As Allah knows all, He will forgive, inshallah, but I ask forgiveness from those who will be affected, right? So he thinks that this is not law, right? And again, the manner in itself is questionable because president has one private account, one official account, right? Usually when it comes to the matters of state or something that is important, it is his official account that is used. But this time he has used his personal account because he actually comes from PTI, of course, the party that made him president, elected him president, and most of its supporters actually follow him on that account, right? So it is essentially communicating to that audience, right? But I want to also actually draw your attention to something else, because it is about laws that were returned, and the fact that the president says that he was not informed or he was not aware that these two bills were returned. So let me actually draw your attention to a news item that appeared in more or less all the newspapers on August 16th. And this says, President returns 13 bills to Parliament, right? And here is an exhaustive list of all the bills that were returned. And none of them, Sana, includes these two bills, right?
Yeah.
After that also, one day before his tweet, another news item appeared in the papers saying that these two bills have become law. And amazingly, it took the president 24 hours to actually take notice of the fact that his consent was not given or taken, or for that matter, whatever happened. So my question, the first thing that comes to my mind is presidency ka saban slow hai kya? I mean, this kind of reaction, why exactly is it that it takes you so much time that on 16th, there are 13 bills that are returned, and there is a procedure, he knows it. Now, amazingly, he has sacked or he has sent back or returned the services of a secretary, and that secretary has then gone on to actually speak to journalists, a senior journalist who used to be a guest in this program also. And he has tweeted out that regarding his statement, that those two bills are still lying on the president's table. If that is so what exactly happened? It seems that the president was on board regarding approval of these two bills, and that's why it these two bills kept on sitting on his table for 10 days. And then when, of course, there was pressure, and naturally next month he retires, and he has actually come from PTI, and he has to actually go back to PTI supporters, so he cannot lose that constituency either. And given that immediately after the passage of these laws, or assent or whatever, or notification of these two laws, there has been implementation of that, and two of PTI's leaders have been arraigned, and they are going through the procedure. He had to actually put out the statement saying that I'm not responsible.
Okay.
So this seems to be a very interesting case of actually, trying to have it both ways.
Right, and that's interesting because I want to talk more about responsibility as well. Barrister Shabbir, before that, I also want to know whether there is anything that can determine whether the president has in fact sent back something that he hasn't commented on, and that whether something has gone back without the president actually viewing it. Is there something that actually guarantees or proves or is written in a certain way that guarantees the fact that this has gone through the president, he has taken a look at it, and he sent it back without comments, so that the president in fact cannot claim that he's never actually seen it and it's been returned or whatever it is?
You see, thankfully, there is no factual controversy here. It is not a case where the president is saying that my signatures have been forged, because his signatures have not been surfaced. All right. He is admittedly saying that I had instructed my office, I had certain reservations to the bill, and I've instructed my office that it should be returned. Now, this is purely a legal question, whether or not, in the absence of any message, can the president just, is it within his discretion that, all right, I want the time to be passed and I am just sending the bill back? This is purely a legal question. So in the present circumstances, I don't think we would have to do a fact-finding inquiry. It would have been a different case had there been his signatures or somebody would have forged his signatures. But I would like to point out to another very important aspect.
Barrister Shabbir, before you continue, is there also no fact-finding inquiry in what the president claims is something that was undermined by his staff, that his will wasn't followed? Is there no fact-finding inquiry there as well, given the fact what his principal secretary is saying?
And Barrister Shabbir, if we talk about staff, of course, the immediate person a president gets in touch with, isn't it principal secretary?
And he was sent back. But regarding something else, very interesting thing, you are saying that there is no problem with facts, right? So what do you say to the reality that the president has actually objected to the issue publicly after the fact, not before the fact or while the things were going on? Once that 10-day period has passed, lapsed, and then he has actually come forward and stated it on in front of public.
You see, 2 or 3 interesting legal questions from this situation arise. First of all, whether or not he has taken any action against his subordinate officers. He's well within his rights to start from issuing show cause notice to any of the officers who are working under him. We need to see whether any action has been taken as to who in particular has defaulted. But the nation as a whole is more concerned with the legality of the law, whether or not this law can be termed as law without the assent of the president. Whether or not an assent which now is deemed to be an assent has been given or not is a larger question. May I point out to 1 or 2 more important points, which is, you see, thanks to 18th Amendment, and you must compliment Pakistan People's Party here also, because after this, previously, there was a time where the president could issue any ordinance. Even now, I think if it would have been open to the president, he would have issued just or promulgated an ordinance. But thankfully, the Supreme Court and the High Courts have created this jurisprudence that the president cannot promulgate an ordinance without an advice from the cabinet. So you see, if this barrier had not been there, probably he would have issued or promulgated an ordinance. But now, thanks to our students and thanks to the law that has developed, he cannot promulgate an ordinance even in a situation like this. Previously, there was time when we had Article 58(2)(b), when the president could dissolve the assembly by exercising powers under Article 58(2)(b). But once again, thanks to 18th Amendment, that 58(2)(b) is not there anymore. So legally speaking, the president as such doesn't have any powers to undo this. He cannot promulgate an ordinance. But simultaneously, what action can be taken against the president? The president is to continue to hold office until his successor assumes office. So let's say if the elections are not being held until March or April or June or for so many years, he will continue to remain in office. The only way to get rid of him is to impeach him, and that requires the parliament to be there, two-third majority of the parliament.
Right, absolutely, and Usama, we'd like to, of course, explore that further as well, given, of course, the legal measures that now exist on both sides as well. And I understand that what you said earlier also means that this is now going to go to the courts. And I also want to know, beyond the status of these laws, what exactly will then be the kind of action that can possibly be taken, given the kind of, we can say, perhaps impunity that there exists, or in terms of the kind of protection that exists for the president, given the fact that this is something that has been claimed by him and has been publicly said. Is there no repercussion at all, or no consequence at all? And whether or not, when we explore this further, given the number of individuals that may be involved, or whether or not the current caretaker setup is in the wrong, will this be something that can have any effect on either the president or the parliament or anybody who's commenting on the situation at the moment?
Right, and Osama, if you could be kind enough to answer another question linked to this regarding, at this moment everybody seems to be debating the end state, what happens to the laws, right? But the question right now is, it is the president who came forward with the allegations. So if it goes to the courts, where does the burden of proof lie? Does it lie with the president or with his staff?
Thank you. I think both of them questions are connected. So in one sense, as my learned colleague Shabbir pointed out, so there are two aspects about the factual controversy. So one is concerning the validity of the law, and the second is whether president acted improperly, whether he sent it not, or whether his staff showed insubordination. They are both separate questions. So concerning the validity of the law, it is the notification issued by Pakistan Printing Press and the government itself and the law minister himself. In the press conference, the very language of the notification says that the assent has been deemed. So that factual controversy stands rested. So in that sense, it is purely a question of interpretation. It is purely a legal question at this point. But I also see what Pitafi Saab and what Sana is also saying, that there has been some, because the matter is very serious, as Raza Rabbani Saab has said, as a very learned senators have said, that this is not a banana republic. How can a president of the country, who is the chief executive, at least in theory, and he's commander-in-chief, if he's alleging that his staff has disobeyed him, and on the other hand, the cabinet secretariat, the parliament secretariat, they are saying that we have not received these bills. They are saying we received them today. In fact, this is what the latest is. So I think this matter is very serious. This should not be investigated, dragged to the courts. The political leadership, especially Senate, as the Senate is in session, as Raza Rabbani has rightly given the suggestion. I am a lawyer, Shabbir Shah is a lawyer. We judges, lawyers love taking the disputes to courts because that is our playground. But I also, as a citizen and someone who is deeply interested in politics and also do not like this increasing judicialization of politics, I would say that this matter, the second aspect, it should be perhaps resolved in the parliament, because it is a serious matter, and the Senate, since the National Assembly is not there, the Senate should take this lead and investigate the second aspect of it. The first aspect, I don't think much can be done, and the only repercussion for the president would have been impeachment. Since the National Assembly is not in session, all the provincial assemblies have been dissolved. So in that sense, I don't think there are constitutional impeachment repercussions. But as Pitafi Saab pointed out, the constitution is not meant to be a code. It is not supposed to supply answers to everyone. every question that can arise. This is more sort of a political realm, political question. The president, if he has acted improperly, there should be political repercussions, but I don't think they should. This is a legal question, or this is a constitutional question. This should be resolved by the parliament, and this should be fought in.
And Usama, I understand the should that you're saying, but unfortunately we haven't really seen much of that happening. Do you think that possibly this is something that is not that complicated for the parliament to resolve? Because we've seen previous issues also, and unfortunately they are dragged to the courts.
And burden of proof also, the question about burden of proof. Usama.
For burden of proof, as I said, in the constitution, since the government's notification itself, there's not much burden of proof left. The government has admitted, so burden of proof would have been relevant if there had been a factual controversy. Now the government, the facts that the parties agree with, the government is saying...
No, let me qualify my question. I was talking about early stage, when the president has come forward and accused his staff of not obeying him. My question was, where does the burden of proof lie?
In that sense, I agree. In the second aspect, the president would perhaps be required to initially show that he instructed his staff, but I think that again would be a very uncomfortable position that he is a commander-in-chief, and the president is slightly trying to discharge that burden in a sense that he has ordered action against his secretary. So if the president had not done anything, then that would have been very fishy. So the president would need to do something in that regard, but ultimately he is the commander-in-chief. The entire state is run in his name. He's in theory the sovereign of Pakistan. So in the sense that again would be more sort of a political question rather than a strictly legal question.
Yeah, Barrister Shabbir, last word from yourself. Looking at this situation where obviously Principal Secretary himself, in his statement, he has obviously denied all of these, allegations, and he has asked for an FIA-based investigation, and he said that FIA should probe into what has actually happened in this whole scenario. Do you see him seeking justice somewhere else? I'm talking about Supreme Court or somewhere where he might go and seek justice from there.
Supreme Court or where?
Supreme Court.
Okay, but why would he? His career is made, by the way. He is not actually sacked as per se. His services are deterred. So but he will keep on going places.
Barrister Shabbir.
Can I get your question again? Who will go to the Supreme Court? In respect of what?
Principal Secretary, of course, he denies all of these allegations and he seeks FIA to probe the whole case.
Okay, may I very quickly explain on Pitafi Saab's very interesting question on the burden of proof and my learned colleague Mr. Khawar Saab's opinion on the Gazette notification. With respect, I disagree on the interpretation of Gazette notification, because you see, sir, Gazette notification is only a ministerial function. It is well settled that whenever there is a dispute between a constitutional provision and a notification which is secondary legislation or which is an executive action, the constitutional provisions will prevail. So, for example, if within 5 days and the constitution requires 10 days, the notification would have been issued, what would have been the value of that notification? So today also, when the courts will see the constitutional provision on one hand and the Gazette notification on the other hand, naturally the constitutional provisions will prevail. So the key question would always remain that whether or not, in terms of Article 75(2), the deeming provision kicks in only after 75(2), or can it kick in terms of 75(1) as well. So that is insofar as the burden of proof lies, because in a court, any ordinary person, me or you, or in fact anybody who's affected by this law, can challenge the vires of this law or the court can on its own also give a finding there, this question of burden of proof would really not be relevant. That is my opinion on this. Now, your second question also seems to be answered. I don't think there is really a need of an inquiry by the FIA, because it is really a question where the president himself, who, may I remind all of us, is the head of the state, and it would not be morally correct if, although strictly speaking legally correct, that we are you see opposing the president once he's made a statement. He has so many powers under the constitution, so I don't think it would be prudent to put him in a box where he has taken one stance which can be resolved with legal interpretation of Article 75.
Right.
That is given, Sana, with your permission. But regarding my own opinion, I think that if somebody has put the president in a box, it is he himself, by using his personal account, because presidents then are also supposed to follow some procedures. But regardless, we are going to see what exactly becomes of this. I usually, when it comes to me, I have high regard for the man personally, but I think this move was really ill-advised.
Right. Thank you very much, Barrister Shabbir, and thank you very much, Usama Khawar, for joining us and being part of the discussion. That's all we have from our first segment. We're going to take a look at a short clip and continue our discussion on the Jaranwallah incident.
यहाँ पर एक मस्जिद है अहले हदीस की, उनका वफद हमारे पास आया 2 मरतबा। उन्होंने आके कहा कि आप यहाँ इबादत ना करें, सुबह 9 बजे आपके लिए मस्जिद खोल दी जाएगी, जिस तरह आप चर्च में इबादत करते हैं ना, उसी तरह आप यहाँ पर इबादत करें। मैंने कहा ज़रा मशवरा करके आ जाएं बड़ों से, सबसे, कि बाद में पहले तो चर्च पर हमला हुआ है, बाद में आपकी मस्जिद पर हमला ना हो जाए। तो उन्होंने कहा वो सबसे पूछ के, वो सबसे बातचीत करके आए हैं, और उन्होंने दोबारा आके मुझे कहा है कि हम हर खतरा मोल लेने के लिए तैयार हैं। और आप आए, हम आपके लिए मस्जिद को।
Well, at least there seems to be some hope in all of the darkness that we have seen around us, and especially, of course, in Jaranwallah. Faisal, given the current scenario, of course, our hearts are there, and we all want to extend the same kind of tolerance and the same kind of peace with all our brethren and with everybody around the world, and protect everyone within the country. But unfortunately, of course, we've seen many such incidents in the past. The Prime Minister went and visited the area as well and met with the families, and I know, of course, that he's been reiterating his resolve to help them. But now what next?
Sana, one thing I really wanted to highlight today is, obviously, when I went through Prime Minister's speech there, one message which was very powerful message, and that was to his people. While talking to them, he talked about that, of course, evil and good persists in every society, and he just wanted to make sure that everyone present there knows that there is more good in this society than the evil, and all of the evils, they will be fought against by the good. And that is why our Prime Minister was there, interim Prime Minister. He highlighted it there, and his message was very strong that whoever was affected by this, of course, the justice would be brought on to them.
By the way, Faisal, you can talk to us as well.
Oh, yes, I can.
But talking about good and evil, Farrukh, is this really about good versus evil, or is there more? There's so much else that also sort of propels us forward.
It is not my place to actually comment on what Prime Minister has said. I think that his statement was most welcome. The fact that Prime Minister actually went to the place, that was most welcome as well, because at this moment, after this kind of trauma, we need everyone, every office bearer to actually go, and there has to be some hand-holding. And that is exactly what is happening. And then Prime Minister actually said something remarkable. Regardless of this good and evil issue, he said that whenever such thing happens, the state has to be there to stop physically any assailant. I think it is very heartening at this moment. But first of all, what actually I am actually looking at And again, the senior puisne judge or justice of the Supreme Court also went there, and that was also very welcome. But what I'm looking at is how quickly can we restore life there, and how quickly can we normalize things, and then assure ourselves that nothing of the sort will happen.
Will ever happen again.
But how quickly will we able to make sure that all of these holes that exist, that unfortunately because of which we see these incidents, will actually now stop?
Last time also, because in your introduction you spoke about abuse of law, right?
Yeah.
And my concern is that because it is nuanced issue, we keep on looking at the blasphemy laws, but they are different from what happened right now. It wasn't application of or misapplication of blasphemy law. It was accusation of blasphemy, where people took law in their own hands, right? And this is the biggest concern here, that even whatever the law might be, whether you agree or not, there usually are safeguards there. You have to have witnesses to prove that there was blasphemy. But here, people just went there and decided on their own that they are going to lynch people or they are going to attack, right?
Exactly.
With that kind of a situation, the first thing is, where is law enforcement? And that is the biggest question right now, because when you have law enforcement, then you can debate the quality of law. First of all, it is the state which has to be there, and I hope in coming days we see a more boisterous and forcible or forceful law enforcement working there to ensure that most vulnerable are not attacked by such vandals.
Absolutely.
And Sana,
our laws exist to protect them.
One liner, earlier we saw this video. I would like to see more of them videos, and plus more of the mosques of the same area. They should be coming forward, and they should be going to their Christian brethren, and they should be taking the same message as it's been highlighted earlier.
Absolutely.
I'm not from Jaranwallah, but I take special solace in the fact that it is my maslak that volunteered.
Absolutely, and of course our sacred places are important to all of us, and we hope that we can extend all of this respect and love to each other as well, as much as we feel for ourselves. And that is of course what we want to be able to ensure citizens of the country as well, and for the state to protect everyone, including especially in fact our minorities. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for being part of the discussion. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll now see you tomorrow.